You want me to play something? Yes. We believe this is stolen.
It is a freezing night in the winter of 1970, inside a damp Victorian house called Headley Grange, hidden in the Hampshire countryside of southern England. The building used to be a poorhouse. The heating barely works, the walls sweat, and half the band refuses to sleep upstairs because they are convinced the place is haunted. Robert Plant, 22 years old, sits beside an open fire with a notebook balanced on his knee. Across the room, Jimmy Page picks at an acoustic guitar, circling through a chord pattern that falls, step by step, like something slowly sinking. And then something happens that Plant will spend the next 50 years trying to explain. His hand starts to write. He later described it as if the pencil were moving on its own. He was barely thinking at all, and when he looked down, most of an opening verse was staring back at him. A lady, glitter, gold, a stairway. By his own account, he read the lines and nearly jumped out of his seat. That scribble beside the fire became the most played, most requested, most obsessed over rock recording of all time. 8 minutes and 2 seconds. No chorus. You have heard those opening notes in guitar shops, in movies, at weddings, and at funerals. It was never sold as a single in America. If you wanted the song, you had to buy the entire album, and it conquered the world anyway. By the early 90s, American radio had reportedly played it close to 3 million times. Stack those plays end to end, and you get decades of non-stop airtime. But here is what makes this story different. 45 years after that night by the fire, Jimmy Page put on a dark suit, walked into a federal courtroom in Los Angeles, raised his right hand, and swore to tell the truth. 8 ordinary jurors had been asked to answer a question that terrified every songwriter on the planet. Did Led Zeppelin steal Stairway to Heaven? We will get to that courtroom, and to the guitarist who never lived to see it. But not yet. First, you need to know what this song actually is, because almost everything people assume about it is wrong. It is not a love song. It is not a hymn. It is not. Despite what one California politician once claimed with a straight face, a message from the devil hidden backwards in the grooves. It is a warning about a woman who thinks she can buy her way into heaven, written by a band the critics of the day dismissed as loud, dumb, and doomed. The song is Stairway to Heaven. The band is Led Zeppelin. And this is the true story of the 8 minutes that took half a century to defend. To understand where Stairway came from, you have to feel what it was like to be Led Zeppelin in 1970. From the outside, they looked unstoppable. 2 albums in, both massive, sold-out tours across America. Money pouring in faster than anyone could count it. But inside the band, something was wearing thin. The music press treated them like a crime. Rolling Stone's early reviews were openly hostile, painting the band as a manufactured hype machine, all volume and no soul. Every roar from the fans was answered by a sneer from the critics, and it stung far more than any of them admitted at the time. So Plant and Page did something nobody expected from the loudest band on earth. They disappeared. In the spring of 1970, the 2 of them retreated to a tiny stone cottage in the Welsh mountains called Bronwar O'r. No electricity, no running water. Just a wood stove, a couple of acoustic guitars, and green hills in every direction. They went for long walks, sang ideas into a cheap tape recorder, and let the quiet in. Out of that cottage came the gentler, folk-leaning side of Led Zeppelin III, and a new ambition neither man could quite name yet. You can guess what happened next, because it always happens. The critics swung even harder. The acoustic turn was called fake, borrowed, a costume. For Jimmy Page, this was becoming unbearable. Remember who this man was. A 26-year-old former session guitarist who had played on hundreds of records before Led Zeppelin even existed. A studio professional who produced every note the band released. He did not want another argument. He wanted a piece of music that would end the argument. he had an idea burning a hole in his head. A song built like a set of gears, starting as a fragile acoustic whisper and shifting upward, section by section, until it ended as a storm. A song that would climb. Now rewind 2 years, because there is a thread here you cannot skip. December 26, 1968, Denver, Colorado. Led Zeppelin play their very first concert on American soil. And they are the opening act, bottom of the bill. One of the bands above them that night is a psychedelic group from Los Angeles called Spirit. Remember that name. Spirit's guitarist was a 21-year-old prodigy named Randy California, a kid so gifted that Jimi Hendrix had discovered him in a New York guitar shop at 15, put him in his own band, and personally given him the nickname California. And on Spirit's first album sat a short instrumental called Taurus. 2.5 minutes, gentle, acoustic, built around a falling minor key guitar figure. Hold that thought. By late 1970, Page was assembling his climbing song in fragments, sketches on home tape machines first, then sessions with the band. The pieces came together at Headley Grange, that cold former poorhouse in Hampshire, where the band lived and worked with the Rolling Stones' mobile recording truck parked in the driveway. Page had the falling acoustic figure. He had the sections mapped out like floors of a building. What the song did not have, until that night by the fire, was its soul. And what exactly did Plant's runaway hand write about? He has answered that question many times over the years, and the answer surprises people. In his telling, the lyric began as a portrait of a woman who takes everything and gives nothing back. Someone convinced that anything worth having could be purchased, including salvation. The opening image of a lady certain that all that glitters is gold is not admiration. It is an old warning dressed in velvet. The glittering thing is never the gold. From there the words open outward, the piper calling you to join him. The two paths. The chance, even late, to change the road you are on. You have probably sung along at full volume without noticing the song is quietly asking you a question. What are you climbing toward, and what is it costing you? So you have a band in exile from the critics, a falling chord pattern, and a verse written by a hand that seemed to move on its own. Now the song had to be captured on tape, and then it had to survive the strangest afterlife any rock song has ever lived. If you love the hidden true stories behind the greatest music ever recorded, take 1 second and hit subscribe. Because what happened next in the studio, and decades later in that Los Angeles courtroom, will change the way you hear these 8 minutes forever. The proper recording came together at Island Studios on Basing Street in London, with a young engineer named Andy Johns behind the console. The band cut the backbone live. Page on acoustic guitar, John Paul Jones moving between bass and keyboards. John Bonham waiting patiently at his kit, Plant singing a guide vocal from the middle of the room. Take after take, Page chased the exact shape he could hear in his head. Listen to what that famous intro is actually doing. Because this is the engine of the whole song. The finger-picked opening is built on a trick far older than rock and roll, a bass line that walks downward one small step at a time, from A down through G sharp, G, F sharp, and landing on F. Musicians call it a descending chromatic line, and composers have leaned on it for centuries to signal sorrow. You can hear the same slow fall in music from the 1600s and, no joke, in Chim Chim Cheree from Mary Poppins. Your ear hears that stepwise fall as gravity. And the trick of Stairway is that the song spends 8 minutes fighting it, adding layer after layer, climbing section by section out of its own descent. A stairway built directly on top of a falling line. The details in the arrangement are almost absurdly delicate for a heavy band. Those woodwinds in the intro that sound like something from a Renaissance court? That is John Paul Jones. Layering wooden recorders, the same simple instrument you squeaked on in grade school, into a small chamber ensemble. And John Bonham, the most thunderous drummer alive, does not hit a single drum until nearly 4.5 minutes into the track. Think about that restraint. The most powerful weapon in the band, sitting in silence for more than half the song, because the architecture demanded it. And this is where it gets strange. The song also speeds up, on purpose. Page built the track to accelerate so gradually that you never consciously notice, each new section nudging the tempo forward so the climb keeps gathering urgency. The rule book of record-making said tempo stays locked. Page broke that rule deliberately, and the result is that by the final section, your pulse has been raised without a single moment you can point to. You do not hear the song get faster. You just feel the ground tilt. Then came the solo. Page has told the story in Brad Tolinski's interview collection, Light and Shade. For the biggest moment on the album, he did not reach for his famous Les Paul. He plugged in an old Fender Telecaster, a gift from his friend Jeff Beck, ran it through a small amplifier, and improvised. 3 separate passes, 3 complete solos, start to finish. He kept the one that felt inevitable. 50 years of guitar polls later, that improvisation is still routinely voted the greatest solo ever recorded. And it was 1 take out of 3, chosen with fresh ears the next day. When Atlantic Records heard the finished album, the executives heard money, and money meant a single. Cut Stairway down, ship it to radio. The band's manager, Peter Grant, a mountain of a man, a former wrestler who guarded Led Zeppelin like a bank vault, refused outright. No single, no edit. If people wanted this song, they would buy the whole album. Industry veterans told him he was burning a fortune. On the 8th of November 1971, the album arrived anyway, officially untitled, marked only by 4 hand-drawn symbols, with the band's name nowhere on the cover. The critics had called them a hype machine. So they released their answer with no name on it at all. The gamble paid off beyond anything Grant imagined. The untitled 4th album went on to sell more than 30 million copies, one of the best-selling records ever made. FM stations played all 8 minutes of Stairway, exactly as Grant predicted, over and over, for decades. It became the song teenagers learned first in guitar shops, so universally that stores turned "No Stairway to Heaven" into a running joke, one famous enough to end up in the movie Wayne's World. A whole generation got married to it, graduated to it, and said goodbye to people they loved with it. But the 2 men who made it began to drift from it. Plant, especially. As the years passed, he grew visibly tired of being the Stairway guy, and in the late 80s he told the Los Angeles Times, in so many words, that he would break out in hives if he had to sing it at every show. The song had become bigger than the band. A monument people expected them to live inside. Page never stopped loving it. Plant could barely stand it. The fame also curdled into something genuinely bizarre. In 1982, a California politician and a group of preachers claimed that playing Stairway backwards revealed hidden praise for the devil, and the claim was taken seriously enough to be aired in a state assembly hearing. The band mostly refused to dignify it. Their label, Swan Song, reportedly answered with one dry line, "Their turntables only play in one direction." Whatever you make of that episode, it tells you the scale the song had reached. People were now hunting for the supernatural inside it. Now here's the detail everyone misses. While Stairway was becoming a monument, Randy California's story was going the other way. Spirit never broke through to that level. Randy kept playing, kept recording, and carried a quiet grievance he rarely made public. Then, on the 2nd day of January, 1997, Randy went swimming off the coast of Molokai, Hawaii, with his 12-year-old son. A rip current caught them both. Randy pushed his boy toward the shore and saved his life. Then the ocean took him. He was 45 years old. In one of his final interviews, published around that time, he had finally said it plainly. He believed the opening of Stairway to Heaven had been taken from Taurus, and that nobody in Led Zeppelin had ever so much as said thank you. Stay with me. because the next part changes everything you think you know about how music gets made. In 2014, a journalist named Michael Skidmore, acting as trustee of Randy's estate, filed the lawsuit Randy never filed himself. 2 years later, it reached a federal courtroom in Los Angeles, and the trial was stranger than any headline could capture. Because Taurus was registered under an old copyright law from 1909, the jury was never allowed to hear Spirit's actual recording. The only version of Taurus that legally existed for the trial was a single page of sheet music, performed live in the courtroom by a hired guitarist while 8 jurors leaned in and listened. Jimmy Page and Robert Plant testified in person. Page admitted that Spirit's first album sat somewhere in his collection of thousands of records, but insisted he had written the intro without ever knowingly hearing Taurus. And at the center of it all sat that falling chromatic line, the same slow descent composers had been using for hundreds of years. In June of 2016, the jury came back. The 2 songs were not substantially similar. Led Zeppelin had won, but the case refused to die. An appeals court ordered a retrial. Then the full Ninth Circuit stepped in, and in 2020, it reinstated the original verdict. That autumn, the Supreme Court declined to hear the case. 6 years of litigation, over a passage lasting a few seconds, ended with a ruling that quietly reshaped American music law. And understand what was really decided, because this was never just a story about money. It was not a story about 2 songs. It was not even a story about a lawsuit. It was a story about who owns the raw material music is made from. The courts never declared that the 2 pieces sound nothing alike. You can listen to Taurus tonight and hear the family resemblance for yourself. What the law decided is that the resemblance lives in a place nobody is allowed to own. That falling line belongs to everyone, to Baroque composers, to Mary Poppins, and to some kid in a guitar shop next Saturday. But the moment that answers this whole story did not happen in a courtroom. It happened 4 years earlier, in Washington, at the Kennedy Center Honors in 2012. Led Zeppelin sat in the balcony being honored for their life's work. 3 men, not 4, because John Bonham had died back in 1980, the loss that ended the band. On stage, Ann and Nancy Wilson of Heart began Stairway to Heaven, quietly at first. Then the lights found the drummer, Jason Bonham, John's son, wearing a bowler hat like his father, playing his father's parts. Then a full choir rose behind them for the final climb. The cameras cut to the balcony, and Robert Plant, the man who joked the song gave him hives, had tears running down his face. Whatever the song had cost him, whatever it had become, in that moment it was simply this: his best friend's boy, playing his father's thunder in front of the whole world. That is the strange power these 8 minutes carry. They have soundtracked first dances and funerals, garage band auditions and federal trials for more than 50 years. Somewhere tonight, someone is fumbling through that intro on a second-hand acoustic guitar for the very first time, and someone else is hearing it played at a memorial for a person they loved. Very few recordings get to hold both of those weights at once. This one always has. So here are 3 things to take with you. 1. The fact. Stairway to Heaven was never sold as a single in America, had no chorus, and ran 8 minutes against every rule of radio, and it still became the most requested song FM radio ever had. The executives wanted it shortened. Peter Grant said no. That no made history. 2. The craft lesson. The song is a climb built on top of a fall, a centuries-old descending line at the bottom, and an arrangement that adds one small layer at a time. Recorders, 12-string, drums held back for 4.5 minutes, a tempo that secretly rises. Restraint is not the opposite of power. Restraint is where power comes from. And 3, the one that stays with you. This story holds 2 guitarists. One built the most famous 8 minutes in rock and spent half a century defending them. The other never got the recognition he wanted and gave his life in the ocean saving his son. The song that binds them says it best. There are still two paths you can go by. In the end, the stairway was never made of gold. It is made of what you build, who you save, and what you leave behind when the music stops. So tell me, where were you the first time you heard all 8 minutes, start to finish, and really listened? Drop your story in the comments. I read every single one. And if this changed the way you hear Stairway to Heaven, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Because there is a new hidden story behind a song you love every week. Thank you for listening. And whichever road you are on tonight, there is still time to change it.
The song they said was stolen. Stairway to Heaven.